I think now it's time for the next panel. So, Thierry, please, you can come and call your speakers.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. And I'd like my set of extremely bright speakers to come here. So, Samia, Rita, Naji, Panos, they are all very experienced leaders in so they are all experienced leaders in the energy field. So we've listened to policy, so now let's move to doing stuff. I'd like to start with a very short introduction. In less than 3 years, we've seen Gazprom not refilling its EU storage in summer 2021, a war in Ukraine, like the ambassador stated, started by Russia in February 2022, sabotage of Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipes in September 2022. None of those would have been forecasted, even by the better or the best analysts. At the same time, policymakers needed to adjust by implementing new rules. Some are very smart. I mean, we've seen the EU storage rule, which I commend the EU for doing this, and we've seen that we are now above the 90% storage filling at the European level. Others aren't so smart, but I'll keep it later. I'd like to, on a personal note, to say that it's very interesting to see that Greece, that has a conservative re-elected government, was the first country, Madame Ambassadrice, you mentioned it, that put on the table electricity market redesigned. And I commend Greece for this, because unless I have missed something, no other country in Europe has put a bright market mechanism for electricity. And by the way, I think as the French, the market mechanism for electricity that the Greek provided to the European Commission is very good for the French also. So there could be links there. I call this, and maybe you won't like my political incorrectness, conservative petroleum blue government. The next conservative petroleum blue government, not like mine, that became more pragmatic was the UK. Very recently, the UK, and I quote the Prime Minister last week, he wanted to ease the burden on working people with a new approach to net zero that is pragmatic, proportionate, and realistic. It's important to understand also that I see in the press the UK being some finger pointing at the UK, that if you do the math, we all talked about CO2 reduction, best in class was the UK, out of the EU 28. Full stop. You like it or not, best in class was the UK. Today, interestingly enough, CO2 emission in the UK are half the price as the EU. So is this going to mitigate the inflation at the UK level? Perhaps. Let me venture one more comment. I've heard very often in Brussels that the war in Ukraine could fast-track the net zero. Yes, words. At the end of the day, is this going to be the case? Maybe not. Maybe not when governments have to put 800 billion subsidies to people, to help people to pay their bill, because they won't have any money left. I mean, we still have some subsidies on energy, but we also have to pay for war in Ukraine. So to discuss the reality, and I really stress the reality, I have here 4 leaders from the industry that are working. Samia, you're working for Sonatrach, you're the director of the gas marketing division. Rita, you're the CEO of DESFA. Naji, you're the CEO of Petroleb and the senior advisor to the Global Gas Center. And Panos Mitrou, you're the Global Gas Segment Director at Lloyd, which is a very important element because at the end of the day, transport is also very important in this quest for net zero. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to split my session in 3. I'm going to ask each of them 3 questions. One is, what changed in the short to medium-term plan since 2021? And again, in the industry, it's decades. So what happened? I mean, those 3 changes, what made it change? What do they have to adapt? And they adapted quite well because we haven't seen blackouts. The second is, what did this 2022 change happen in your 2035 plans? And the third question, for only 2 of them, will be the decarbonization long term, because some are coming from the producing side and they are not so much, that's not so much the focus. So let's start straight away. Rita, you are the local. Thank you for, we've had the pleasure to visit your regas terminal that, again, saved Europe. And so my question to you is, what did those massive changes entail in the short term for your business? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Thierry. And thank you for the organizer. I'm always very glad to be back in this, let's say, symposium, where a very interesting debate every year takes place. So what has been happening in the short term, I think this is in front of everybody. In the course of 2022, we had, let's say, almost overnight, I have to say, in the end of April, turn our system, our natural gas infrastructure system, from a pure or essentially largely an import infrastructure to a transit infrastructure. And this has been dramatically necessary the moment in which Bulgaria stopped receiving gas from Russia. Of course, this was not something that we were not, let's say, maybe not for this reason, but preparing our system to the possibility of working reverse flow south to north, or in general creating flexibility in the system is something that has been going on since years in Greece with, let's say, of course, first of all, the interconnection with the TAP. That means, of course, important diversification of supply sources. But already a few years ago, the first physical reverse flow toward Bulgaria took place. Of course, this has been a big operational burden, but this has more strategically affected the way at which we look at our infrastructure. Because, let's say, since then, by capacity auction, by our market test that we have run recently in the first part of this year, we are receiving more and more requests for capacity bookings that are intended not for the domestic market, but predominantly for transit flows. And this, of course, will be increased even more at the beginning of next year with the interconnection with the new regasification terminal of Alexandroupolis. So the natural gas grid of Greece, its infrastructures that were built fundamentally at the beginning of the century to import the gas from Russia, are becoming a key import corridor for LNG to receive, to deliver this quantity of gas to the broader region. This is not without difficulties. Difficulties that are on a different level. The first are the fact that we have to rush in a very intense investment plan to make it possible. We do have bottlenecks, and we're working hard to remove these bottlenecks with many investment, which a very pragmatic and government have facilitated in their approval process. There's been very fast track approval process in the course of last year of new investment. And so the challenge, of course, is to deploy these significant capital commitments. The second is that we are not alone in the sense that, of course, we need to coordinate all along the routes, because it's not enough to deliver the gas at the border, where we are going to increase 4 times our export capacity, but this gas needs to be able to flow through Bulgaria, Romania, to Hungary, to Moldova, to Ukraine, Serbia, of course, and this requires a huge coordination with our neighboring countries and TSO, and we are working hard with this vertical corridor working group to make it possible. And last but not least is the challenge that comes with the need of doing all this in in the context of the energy transition. We are not making this investment 40 years ago, when the prospects for natural gas were very long-term. We are doing them in the second part, largely of 2020, where, let's say, with the efforts toward decarbonization, we have big and legitimate question marks about what will be the use long-term of these assets. And therefore the need, but we will discuss about long-term, of make them able to, let's say, facilitate the energy transition and answer security of supply needs today, resilience needs today, but energy transition in the not far away future.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria Rita. Okay. Thank you, Marietta. And thanks for all those countries up north that you've helped. And again, perhaps also here the European Commission, with its program of common interest, had foreseen and had interconnected those countries. I'd like to move to a producing country now. So let me move to Samia. Samia, you've seen loads of European leaders and President, Prime Minister, Commissioner flying into your country in 2022, begging you for more gas. So what did it change? And I will dare one forecast, because I do forecast sometimes stuff. In 2023, I think your company, Sonatrach, in terms of pipeline gas, will be the biggest exporter of pipeline gas into Europe, above Gazprom. That was the case prior to 2022. So, Samia, you have 14 minutes to tell us how did you accommodate all our leaders' requests. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Thierry. Good morning, everyone. I would like first to thank you for hosting us today and giving us the opportunity to speak about Sonatrach first, and also to share some thought and ideas that Sonatrach has, what happened to our business during the last few years. So yeah, indeed, 2022 was a very busy year for Sonatrach. It's not a secret that we have received a lot of representatives from European governments, from European institutions, from European companies that comes to Algeria to ask about the capacity of Sonatrach to deliver more gas beyond what is already committed under a long-term contract, whether it's pipeline gas or LNG deliveries. Since many years now, we have covered somehow part of the security of the supply of the European market, but we got this request to add some additional volumes during 2022. Not only from what we call our traditional customers, those who are very well-known, big companies, etc. We are linked to them with very long-term contracts, but we also received requests, and still up to now, we still have some requested from new customers, new companies that I would say dare to contact Sonatrach to ask for some additional volumes. So what happens in our business during 2022? We did some huge efforts for a company as ours in a very short period of time. So we managed to make available additional volumes by enhancing on a very fast track our production in some identified fields. We invest a lot for that. We put in place some operational tools to help our upstream transportations and also our people from liquefaction facilities to handle this issue. And in 2022, we managed to put over 10 BCM additional production, which represent in export, if we talk about pipelines, like 4 BCM additional volumes that were supplied to European market on a spot basis. 2022 was a milestone year for Sonatrach because it was the first year where we managed to sell on a spot basis volumes through the pipelines. We do have spot volumes for LNG. We know how to do this, but for the pipelines, that was the first time. So this was the response of Sonatrach regarding the main request we got from some companies. We are still committed under the long-term contract with our partners in the European market, and we try also to keep up our effort to develop more our production, to maybe give the chance to those who don't know Sonatrach yet to access to some volumes. For those who doesn't know Sonatrach, we have 2 main pipelines. One pipeline that goes to Spain with a capacity of 10 BCM. Another pipeline who goes directly to Italy with a capacity of around 32, 33 BCM. But those capacities are not infinitely extendable. That means that we will cover a part of the request and the needs that are today in the European market, but we will only cover part of it. And the aim of Sonatrach, that is well known, is to remain among those who were big players for many years again. You said that you are betting on our exports this year. I don't know the rank of Sonatrach by the end of the year, frankly speaking. I know that we used to be the 3rd exporter to Europe, but the year is not finished yet. We still have some weeks and months to cover. We will see. We will see the figures, and we will do our maths as well at the end of this year. But we will continue to fulfill our commitment, and the vision of Sonatrach of the European market is not limited to 2023, but rather to the medium and the long term. That means that we will continue making efforts to develop our production. That means that we will invest. That means that also we need maybe to have also a kind of security regarding this investment that will be put in place. We are giving very important consideration to security of supply. But as an exporter, a producer, and also an investor, we need also to have a kind of guaranteed demand on a mid and long-term basis, not only to cover a short period of time. This is very important for a producer as Sonatrach. Our business is highly capital intensive, So we need also to have a return on our investments.
Thank you very much. I've learned something. I've learned you were selling some spot with the pipe, which what Gazprom used to do many years ago. I'd like to quote Commission President Ursula von der Leyen before giving you the floor, Naji. I think she stated in June in 2022 in Cairo, after she had signed a memorandum of understanding with Egypt and Israel, I see the energy supplies were mostly traditional in the north part, now are shifting toward the global south and east, exactly what you stated, Maria Rita. So, Naji, you have a much wider area, all the rest around the Mediterranean. So please let us know what the changes in 2021 to 2023 happened, made in your region. Push a button.
Thank you again. Thank you, Thierry. Thanks for the Hellenic Association and for the GGC Global Gas Center for inviting me again to come to this lovely city and to speak to you today. I'll speak, as you said, I will speak about a wide region, but I will focus on maybe in the first part, at least, on the existing producing countries, which are Egypt and Israel. Okay, in the second part, I will talk about Cyprus, Lebanon, my country, and a little bit of the Gaza Strip or the Palestinian territories. Maybe I will start with Egypt. Egypt has always tried to build itself as a gas hub for the East Mediterranean. And Egypt, in Egypt, the most major international oil companies are working since ages. They have a very well petroleum industry, well established. And it is really well placed to play a role of regional gas hub. It has also 2 operating LNG export terminals on the Mediterranean Sea, a pipe link to Israel, which was used first to supply Egyptian gas to Israel before moving to the opposite side and be supplied, or Egyptian to be supplied by Israeli gas through this pipeline. We have another pipeline from Egypt going to the East Mediterranean countries called the Arab Gas Pipeline, going to Aqaba, Jordan, from Jordan to Syria, with a branch line to Lebanon, with a plan. It used to be a plan, because now all these projects are really in freezing. A plan to link with the Turkish network. And also Egypt is very important for gas because it is controlling the vital Suez Canal. And there, by imposing taxes on the LNG carriers, it can also control in a way or another the flow of LNG from the East Suez to the West Suez, or vice versa. However, despite years of petroleum experience and gas discoveries, Egypt's gas output is beginning to weaken again. I must say that all these infrastructures that we talked about, the LNG terminals, the pipeline, and so on, were built at a period when Egypt really thought that they have enough gas to be supplied for all these export outlets. And unfortunately, at that time, the ministry, the energy ministry or petroleum ministry officials, they mix between the the reserves between the P1 and the P2, and they really calculate everything they have as proven recoverable reserves. And unfortunately, at that time as well, domestic consumption was increasing dramatically because gas was subsidized. Then at that time, Egypt was exporting gas, domestic consumption was increasing, and suddenly they discovered that they don't have enough gas to supply everybody. Then they stopped, and unfortunately now the LNG terminals at the Mediterranean coast are used to export Israeli gas in a way or another. Egypt is only able to supply its domestic market, a little bit of gas for the Arab neighbors through the Arab gas pipeline, and import gas from Israel through the pipeline which was built originally to supply Israel with Egyptian gas. Anyway, after this introduction, and with this declining output and rising consumption again and again, we have to remember that Cairo in the Mediterranean is the largest populated country. They reach 105 million inhabitants, and this growth in population needs plenty of energy, and this is enormous. And when we know that every transport means in Cairo itself is gas fueled, we know that the Egyptians have problem to supply all gas to these consumption outlets. Anyway, facing these problems, LNG export from Egypt dropped to 0 in June this year after reaching a 12 years high in 2022. For so many reasons, because Israel stopped for some time to supply gas to Egypt. That's why LNG from Egypt went to 0. But things can really change dramatically there, especially that the Egyptians are doing everything possible in order to keep the LNG business working, because it is for them a money cash income, and they are convincing, or they convinced the Israeli to keep supplying gas to let the LNG terminals working again and again, together with some American pressure. And now it seems Israel committed to supply more and more gas and to double the LNG exports from Egypt by 2027. Enough now for Egypt. Going to Israel. Israel is really lucky to find so much gas offshore. They started exporting gas through to Egypt, as we said. They have also a small pipeline going to Jordan. This is nobody is talking about, because the Jordanians are very sensitive about this. And they are considering other gas export options, including floating LNG terminals on the Mediterranean coast. Although Tel Aviv is really concerned about the potential security risks of mooring such vessel in its water. Also, a pipeline, another pipeline from Israel, this time from Leviathan field to Egypt, is being considered to the Egyptian LNG terminals, but the companies involved in Leviathan insisted that the gas to be channeled through this pipeline to go for the LNG and to be exported, and not to go to the domestic market of Egypt itself. Also, we heard talks about a pipeline between Israel and Turkey, and this has been remerged very lately. But I believe such a pipeline could be really a geopolitical nightmare, as it would depend on the bumpy relationship between Tel Aviv and Ankara. We know every day they change their mood. And this pipeline needs, anyway, to pass through the Cypriot waters. And this have been blocked by the Turkish Cypriot long-standing tensions. With this, I really stopped, and I will continue with Cyprus and Lebanon later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Naji. So let me now turn to Panos. You're the master of the sea. We started with Greece. We finished with Greece. And I'd like to add to what I stated about the EU ETS. The Commission has taken new views regarding the maritime. And so I suppose this is going to impact massively your sector. The floor is yours, Panos.
Thank you, Thierry, and thanking the Hellenic Association of Energy Economics and the Global Gas Center for this opportunity. I will come to the EU ETS, which is, I would say, the latest headache that we have. But before coming to that, and since the initial question was what happened since the last major geopolitical developments, let me just mention that the crisis we are currently going through has not started with the geopolitical outbreak of Ukraine. We have consistently underinvested in energy infrastructure for years now. And from a shipping, maritime perspective, I would say this is definitely proven to be the case. So at the time where we needed to replace pipelined gas, we found ourselves in a position where we didn't have enough ships to make this happen. During the last decade, we were building 30 to 40 ships. That was the annual average. Last year, we ordered 126 LNG carriers, almost 4 times what we used to order a few years ago. This year, I believe we will reach a number exceeding 100 units, probably close to the number that we saw last year. If not within the year, by the beginning of January, beginning of 2024, we will have a new number of 120 ships. Despite that, we still see, from an LNG value chain perspective, we are irrelevant to the size of the global energy market. So last year, we saw a global use of 8 billion tons of coal, 3 billion tons used in China only. The increase in coal use due to the crisis and the inflation on energy prices was 5%, which means approximately 400 million tons of coal were just the increase of the coal use. 400 million tons is the global LNG trade as we speak. So LNG in terms of mass, okay, not calorific value, not energy, but in terms of mass, represents only the annual increase in the use of coal. Why am I saying this? Because we still have a problem. We are still underinvesting in our energy infrastructure and energy assets. And this will continue to be the case with the new value chains of, let's say, greener solutions, greener, cleaner fuels and commodities. So coming to the latest development of Fit for 55 and EU ETS and Fuel EU, the truth is that this is a regional measure. This is an EU measure. And based on what we see, this will increase the the cost of transportation. In some segments, not the gas segment, but this could be also the case for energy commodities, we may see even ships and transportation routes diverting to new hubs in Northern Africa, for example, or ports outside Europe. It may not sound so positive for Greece, but a ship transporting gas to a Turkish terminal for export to the European system will save approximately, we have estimated, something between 400,000, 500,000 euro per trip, per port of call, instead of unloading the same amount of gas in an EU terminal. So we could even see some competitive advantage unfolding for terminals outside Europe. I can assure you that in the container ship world, for example, Northern Africa ports now seem much more appealing than EU Mediterranean ports. So we need to be cautious on how we apply those measures, and I think the only way forward would have been for a global application of such measures under the umbrella of the IMO, a global ETS, a global carbon pricing that will apply to all ships and ports. Otherwise, we will see this probably arbitrage effect to save money from exporting or importing energy commodities in Europe. So I hope this covers your last part of the question, but I would like to stress again, we need to sit down and think what is the investment we're undertaking on energy assets. This includes ships and shipping. We are not ready yet for the transition. We are not going to the right direction based on the numbers and the figures we see today.
Thank you, Panos. So if I summarize a bit, some hope. I mean, this industry has been resilient, but big question about 2035, which is a nice intro into my next session. So I'd like to go back to you, Samia, 2035. I mean, this is normally the decade. I mean, we are thinking about decades. You stated you wanted some visibility. You stated you wanted increase visibility in gas demand. You stated also, if I remember correctly, that the pipes were nearly full, or could, while though your LNG plant, I've checked it before, was not, I mean, they operated at a lower load factor, but it makes sense because it's cheaper to produce and to ship gas to Europe via pipe. And so my question to you is, if we look longer term, what have changed in the last 2 years? So once you've seen all this flurry of political person, you had to sit down, you had to design billions or dollars or euros of investment. Where are you today?
Thank you. Maybe before answering this question, I would like to introduce some concepts that are leading the LNG business in Algeria. That will give maybe a wider picture of this part of the business and explain also and maybe give a response also regarding the load factors that you mentioned. It's first of all, it's important to mention that Sonatrach has a considerable capacity of LNG, which is considered as flexibility tool for Sonatrach. It's very important to understand this. So we have 4 main LNG terminals, 3 in the western part of the country, 1 in the eastern part of the country, By the way, the eastern one still is the one that is delivering LNG cargoes to Greece. We have visited this morning Revitusa terminal, and the kind lady explained that the first cargo that was delivered to this terminal came from Algeria, and still she wants that it will keep up like this for so many years again. Cross finger that it will be the case. We, as I said, we have 4 LNG terminals. The whole capacity is totaling 56 million cubic meters per year LNG, which means that's more or less 32 BCM a year. This flexibility allows Sonatrach to deliver LNG since decades now. We are the pioneer in that business. We have delivered the first LNG cargo ever to a European country, which is UK at that time. This flexibility allows, as I said, Sonatrach to deliver LNG to its traditional customers in Europe, but also to reach maybe lands that are far and not linked to Algeria by the pipelines. We, from time to time, deliver LNG to Asian markets when the value is guaranteed. We have in the past delivered some LNG cargoes to American continent. That means that this flexibility is really a major asset for Sonatrach. Back to maybe what happened 2 years ago, it's worth to say that this part of the business is emerging from a particular situation caused by the COVID pandemic. One of the consequences was the drop in the demand. So at that time, Sonatrach had to adapt to that situation, and we decided to carry out some maintenances because it was the right time, maybe to be in line with the drop of the demand. But when the demand recovered, we used our terminal to fulfill the commitment of Sonatrach with regards to the contract she has with the long-term partners. Having said that, the LNG facilities remains a flexibility tools, as I said, for Sonatrach. It secured part of its commitment, and it is used as a balanced for the export. You said it, pipeline is cheaper, and also the flows are steady. So while the LNG allows you to maybe reach lands that are not close to our country, gives you more flexibility to optimize your sales, and of course to make some margins, which is the aim of our companies and all those who are involved in that business. So thanks to this flexibility, Sonatrach adapt its strategy accordingly. We have long-term contracts, even for LNG, but from time to time we have additional availability of the product. This additional availability can be sold under pipelines, spot now, or LNG. That's what makes the flexibility of this tool making a huge sense. Regarding the load factor now, it's important to understand the structure of our LNG terminals. We have among the 4 terminals that I have mentioned earlier, 2 that are, we have in each terminal 6 trains, separate trains. And those trains are used not only to balance, but we can modulate the use of those trains according to the demand. So when the demand is high, we can use the 6th train in one time in each terminal. When the demand is low, or when the product is not available, we can switch on or switch off one train. It's not a mega train that you used to use on a high load factor. So that's why maybe you can see from time to time, if you take what is exported as LNG and compare it to the full capacity of the 4th terminal, you can see that the load factor is very low compared to the average worldwide. But this flexibility is not used as the main export tool for Sonatrach. It is to optimize the sales. Pipelines are there, and you said it's cheaper. So this is the first option we have. We still fulfill our commitment under the long-term contract for the LNG. We used to deliver LNG to Greece, to Turkey, to France, to Spain, to Italy as well, to our affiliate in the UK. But the remaining part of this capacity is then used to balance and modulate based on what is the demand every year. Regarding our plans for maybe the mid and the long term, our strategy still regarding the LNG still remain delivering LNG under ex-ship basis. So we have a fleet, our own fleet, 6 LNG tankers that are used to deliver the LNG to the European countries, but from time to time also deliver spot cargoes to other part of the world. And we have a plan within Sonatrach to invest in a very short period of time, in the next 4 or 5 coming years, almost $40 billion. $40 billion, mainly for exploration, production. This is linked to what I said earlier, enhancing the production, producing new capacities in new fields. And with regard to the downstream, part of this investment will be focused on refineries and petrochemicals. I don't think that in the very short term we will invest in new LNG capacities, at least for the time being. But we have launched a few years ago the project of increasing our storage capacity in our terminal in Skikda. So we will have a new storage capacity that will come on stream in a few months. And we have built a new jetty in that terminal that will allow us to load big ships. For the moment, we can only load Medmax. That means small ships that is delivering only natural gas for LNG, for Mediterranean basin, of course, for cost-saving reasons. So this new jetty will also allow us to accept loading big ships and reaching new part of the world. That is for the plans in the LNG and also natural gas, because new production will come, and this huge investment that is in our plans need to be faced by a market in the coming years. If we act focused on our strategy on investing, we need to be sure that those investments are done on purpose to secure the deliveries for the countries who are not producing this commodity.
Thank you very much, Samia. Perhaps just to give you some hope, if I read the Financial Times from last earlier Monday, Dieter Jorgensen, which is the Director General of Energy at the European Commission, changed her mind, if I read it properly, because she stated she wanted US LNG, but let's put it LNG, for decades to come. And there was an S to decades. So hopefully things are changing. I'm moving to you, Naji. Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, if you want.
Samia, I have two questions, very, very quick. If you have a market for LNG, will you go for LNG first? Second, what about unconventional gas that you have? You have plenty of unconventional gas. Are you planning to invest there?
For LNG, we will go where the value is. For the time being, as I said, it's used as a flexibility. But if tomorrow there is any kind of value and making sense for us, of course, we still have spare capacities. And if the availability of the production for the next coming years allow us to fill our pipelines first, and then for the remaining capacity, use it for the LNG, of course. But again, this is linked to this question of investment in shipping. We have a capacity of shipping. It is more or less limited if you compare it with some other big countries that are involved in LNG. But for the timing is enough to cover our commitment. Tomorrow, if there is a confirmed market for LNG, I think, yes, it's part of our strategy to diversify our supplies, not only focusing on the European market. For the second part, you have asked about unconventional resources. Yes, we have huge potential. We are, if I'm not wrong, the third in the world with the potential of unconventional. This is part of our strategy as well. We are assessing, as others are doing, for the time being, focusing on the conventional one, but that doesn't mean that we will not tomorrow develop this part of the business, especially that for tomorrow, it's not only natural gas, but there is also this question of hydrogen that is on the table, that it might be linked. So we are already studying this part of the business. Yes.
Thank you, Samia. And now you to answer a question, Naji. So you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. I will continue now with with our neighbors, Cyprus. Cyprus, such a peaceful and lovely island, has 3 main problems. One, they have a small market. Second, they have only discovered small quantities of gas until now. And third, they have a very friendly but problematic neighbor, Turkey. Now, Cyprus is talking to Israel in order to get maybe some gas through a pipeline from Levasian to Cyprus, to the LNG terminal in Cyprus. And this LNG terminal, which is being really a long time project in the island, could really provide an outlet for the recent stranded discoveries in Cyprus as well. However, we heard about so much discussions between the Cypriot government and the international oil companies, including Chevron, for example, about what to do with the gas discovered in Cyprus. Most of them would like to channel this gas to Egypt and export it as LNG through the Egyptian LNG terminals. But the Cypriots would like to do it from their own LNG terminals by all means. And now, with the increasing amount of discoveries in Cyprus, the island really is in a good position to be able to launch its regional initiative. They are talking to Israel, as we said. They are talking also with the Egyptian in order to lay a pipeline from Cyprus to Egypt directly. They are in talks with the Lebanese, with the others. But the problem of Cyprus is that they would require significant financial and political will in order to move in that direction. And this is really a little bit still lacking in Nicosia. In neighboring country, in Lebanon, in my country, one of the positive results of the boundary accord with Israel signed in October 2022 is that it allows the Lebanese to move ahead and go forward with the exploration offshore the country. And now, at the time being, Total, Eni, and Qatar Energy are really starting the first offshore well in the Lebanese territory. The results will appear within 1 month or two, and the Lebanese are really hopeful that such hopefully a discovery, a commercial discovery, would change the very black economic situation in the country. This situation in Lebanon, as a result of the boundary accord with Israel, shows that so much energy and energy reserves and gas reserves could be found in the region if we have a positive political environment. And this is a lesson to be really said and taught to everybody in this region. We need a positive political environment in order to move ahead and profit from this richness that we have, this wealth that we have. I will end by a small discovery that was really found in the mid-80s. Gaza is on the Mediterranean, is part of the Palestinian territories. Gaza Marine in the mid-80s, but was never developed because of political problems between Israel and the Palestinian territories. Now we heard that the Egyptian e-gas is really moving forward with plans to develop this field with the blessing of Israel and the Palestinian territories. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Naji. So the great thing about having a great panel is they do the work. I have nothing to do. So Naji did ask you a question, Samia. I'd like to move to Rita and perhaps throw at the problem that we've just heard from Panos. So this was something new to me. So what are your long-term plan? And I mean, as we've heard from Panos, Turkey could become a competitor to you.
Well, thank you, because if you were not making the question, in any case, I would have commented, because indeed, let's say, there is an issue of risk of arbitrage and the risk of competition between, let's say, the European, let me call it, route of LNG coming through Greece to, let's say, Southeast Europe, and gas coming from Turkey. Recently, we have seen few cases, significant cases of deals between Central European buyers and Potash, starting with, of course, with the swap with the Bulgarian company for delivering LNG cargoes in Bulgaria, in Turkey, and receiving pipe gas at the border between Turkey and Bulgaria, which, by the way, on the basis of the information which have been publicly made available, it's costing them at least 2 times more than if they would have passed through Greece. So, of course, not all the terms are known, but the cost seems very, very high, which raised a question about the fact that sometimes the uncertainty on availability of capacity in the regulated system may be a disadvantage, because, let's say, when we met many times last year with the Bulgarian representative asking us, can we book capacity in Revitusa and take one BCM for the next 10 years? And we always have to say, you need to come, there is an auction. So this is an element that needs to be taken into account, plus 2 recent transactions between the Hungarian MOL and Potash, and more recently, I think it was announced yesterday, between OMV Romania and Potash to buy gas on an 18-month basis. This is indicative of the fact that, of course, in one way, Russian gas is coming back through under a different umbrella. This is an European problem, not only a Greek concern about the use of our infrastructure. But of course, this represents a risk of even more the congestion in the use of the transit capacity northern of Greece, so Bulgaria, Romania. If additional volumes are channeled from Turkey, then of course less capacity might be available for the LNG that is arriving in Greece. So this is a point that we are very, very aware of, very careful about its implication, and is part also of the discussion we are having in the context of the vertical corridor. You asked me mid-long-term plan. Of course, for us, mid-term means completing the projects that we have on the ground that will multiply by 4 the transit capacity of Greece. Already quite shortly, let's say mid-2020, end of 24 and mid-25, let's say with the completion of the compressor stations that we are building, we will have this capacity available. But of course, this for us is linked with the work we are doing with our neighbors in order for this capacity to be channeled up north. Coming back to the long term, that of course is the big uncertainty with the role of gases and the role of gas infrastructures in the energy transition. Of course, what we are doing is to make sure that whatever we build nowadays is for pipes 100% ready, 100% certified, in order in the future to transport other molecules, and in particular hydrogen, green hydrogen. And let me say that Greece, of course, as I understand also the minister said, we need to be realistic and pragmatic, and in the gas business we certainly are by definition. But Greece has, let's say, a potential of excess renewables. Is a fact that the country struggle to exploit all the potential for renewables because the demand is not so big, end of the story. And so renewables are already curtailed during the summer here in Greece. So one way, of course, is transport electricity, but much more efficient would be transport molecules. So Greece can, in the future, keep playing a role of importing, but also producing and exporting green molecules, for which, let's say, hydrogen pipelines will have a role of. And in this respect, of course, whatever we do also with our neighbors, TSO, starting with Bulgaria, with which we have recently submitted to European Commission a proposal for a hydrogen interconnector, which has been included in the PCI list. Of course, it's a project that will have a long way to come, but still is a recognition of the importance to develop this southeastern corridor for energy, also in the context of the energy transition. The other important thing for us in the mid-term is, and coming back to shipping and transportation in general, is to unlock and create the condition in Greece for the use of LNG in the heavy-duty transportation. It's a chicken and egg problem, but we are solving the egg one or the chicken one by having already a truck loading facility and by having in a couple of years' time a jetty that will enable bunker ship to be loaded. So the ability to deliver LNG to the ships will be there even sooner, probably. What is important is that we are really, as a country, as Europe, pragmatic and don't kill the chicken in this case, because if we start telling everybody that we will jump directly from naphtha, oil to whatever green fuel of the future, it means that we will lose the LNG opportunity that is able to deliver a reduction in the emission and a much cleaner, of course, air immediately. So what we are pushing harder is really to try to prevent the risk that really we miss this opportunity for immediate, partial, if not total, but important decarbonization of the transportation sector. And let's say the other mid-term focus that we are putting, on which we are working very, very seriously this day, is the one of carbon capture storage. Carbon capture storage is becoming more and more all over Europe, starting from UK, as you said, they've been the first in class, the best in class, an important element to solve the problem of fast decarbonization. And in this respect, of course, not only we have Prinos as a country, not DESFA, that can be converted into an underground storage facility for CO2, but we are working, and again, under the PCI scheme, to develop a grid that will collect CO2 from the various emitters and liquefy it in a single liquefaction place, possibly close to Revitussa, in order to use the cold power of the liquefaction of the regasification facility and put it on ships, which today can be used for to deliver this CO2, maybe today in the future to Prinos, but then in many depleted reservoirs in the Mediterranean basin, starting from Egypt, that has a big reservoir which are declining in terms of capacity. So we see this is another angle in which for the mid and long term we really need to focus a lot. Our business navigates through very complex waters because everybody needs us today, everybody wants us today, and they tell us, please disappear tomorrow. By miracle. So every time we need to take a decision, we always, let's say, bet against the odds and against the fact that sometimes the reality and the pragmatism will prevail. But it's difficult to be the hero and the villain twice in the same day. But we are doing a concrete step. And let me add one very, very last thing is the recent also unfortunate events, weather-related in Greece with the floods and the fires, of course, prove the importance of the resilience of the energy system. And I'm glad to say, notwithstanding the very sad circumstances, that the underground gas pipeline system proved to be absolutely resilient. We never had one interruption. We haven't had any problem to the security of the infrastructure. Of course, we had the damages to some facilities, but the gas kept flowing and no one had heating or, let's say, interrupted. So I think we needed to take into account also in a reliable energy mix, not only the security of supply, but also technical solutions like underground pipelines that increase the resilience.
Thank you very much, Maria Rita. So navigate complex waters. Who better than Panos to move to the next? How are you seeing the 2035 world? I mean, with more ships, but perhaps also with cleaner ships. And how is this going to unfold?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. First of all, I would say that we tend to think and discuss a lot what will be the fuel of the future and what will propel ships in 2035, 2040 and beyond. I think we're missing the big picture, and the big picture is exactly what is it that these ships will carry in 2035. Because if we continue trading only oil and gas, irrespective of what will be the fuel of the ship, somebody will be burning barrels of oil somewhere, or coal, if we're talking about coal carriers. And then there will be no transition in the horizon. So we feel that the main question is, how can shipping serve the transition of all sectors, and especially the energy sector? And this means we need to invest in ships that we have not invested that so far, and we do not have full awareness and visibility of the technology required. We see three great new value chains and shipping chains, and these are practically ammonia, hydrogen, and carbon dioxide. Ammonia, which is the imminent one, as a carrier of hydrogen, potentially liquefied hydrogen in the future, and certainly what is the only option that we have in order to negate part of the problem, recycling carbon dioxide, which means transporting carbon dioxide to sequestration points around the world. And I think this closing of the carbon cycle is going to be critical, is going to prove critical, essential into meeting any transition goals. I mean, most probably, based on what we see, the ambition needs to be there, but we are not making it yet. So we will definitely gonna need a value chain which will allow us to negate part of the harm we will have already delivered to the planet, and part of the harm can only be negated through the capturing and storage of excess carbon dioxide. So getting back to the 2035 question, I think we need, following my previous statement and my previous response, we need to seriously consider and think out of the box. Do we have the shipbuilding capacity, the resources to build the ships that we are in need of? The immediate answer is no, as we speak. We will need to find ways to build more ships of every type. And as far as fuel is concerned, I don't think we are there yet. I don't think we will see a massive use or massive availability of clean fuels, not only for shipping, but any transportation sector until 2035. So most probably until then, LNG will be the main component of alternative fuels. And by the way, before coming here, I was compiling a scoping document for a new technology, a new carbon capture system on board ships. So I believe one more option that we have will be carbon capture on board, coupled with the use of LNG primarily, where the carbon dioxide volume produced is quite limited to the use of conventional fuel. So with LNG, carbon capturing on board becomes much more feasible. And this is perhaps something that we will see coming into ships in the forthcoming years. And I believe that between 2030 and 2035, depending on how we will progress the development of the carbon value chain in general, we will see more and more ships being equipped with such equipment. And especially the ones that will have lost the train, the long-term train of clean fuels. So yeah, this is more or less my view about 2035 and focusing particularly on shipping.
Okay, thank you very much. Naji, you wanted to add something?
I hope it's working. I would like to also look at 2035. And if we look at the scenarios of gas demand worldwide, especially in Europe, and if we look at the scenarios or the plans, the programs, the projects of LNG worldwide, especially in the US, many analysts are predicting a gas oversupply in the second half of this decade, in the first half of next decade. What I wanted to take from this is that the East Mediterranean producer, okay, rather than looking at Asian or European markets, I believe they must also look at their regional markets, their own markets. They have to look at markets like Syria, for example, because if peace will prevail in Syria, then we will have huge demand for energy there. If we will have peace in the region with Israel, and now we are talking about, or we are hearing about, normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, this will open the way for so many interesting cooperation in the region. Rather than looking at Asian and European markets, we have to look at the need of the region itself. Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and, for example, Western Saudi Arabia. Western Saudi Arabia, for your information, is in bad need of gas. Jeddah, Mecca, all this is in bad need of gas. And a pipeline from the East Mediterranean to the western part of Saudi Arabia will be great. Okay, this, in addition to further enhance or even build a broader political and economic integration in the region, will help to prevail a peaceful environment and will be good for the economies of the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Naji. So after your positive dream for 2035, let's move to Panos and Rita about 2050. So we are hearing Europe that wants to be carbon free or net zero, whatever. So how is this going to be for you on the sea in 2050?
Okay, that's a quite challenging question. So what we know today is that the ambition we've all agreed to and set is net zero at least by 2050. Net zero for the whole shipping sector. And this will mean a huge investment, a huge task in developing technology that will make this happen. We have a number of clean fuels, candidate clean fuels. We hear a lot about ammonia. Methanol is one more option. Perhaps LNG or other fossils coupled with CCS and biofuels, biomethane, for example, which also represents a great prospect. I'm not sure what the final mix will be, but we believe there are going to be different ship types and different trades focusing on different technologies. And I would say in one major point, we need to have everything on the table. I saw last week in China a presentation on an approach on the green, blue, and red scenario. Green meaning renewables and hydrogen-based fuels, blue meaning fossils coupled with CCS, and red meaning referring to nuclear. And I will not be surprised if we see nuclear also expanding, extending into the shipping sector. We have already seen some projects, some technology development. It is a great temptation to build a ship that will never need to be fueled in its life. So most probably for the large container ship, for example, of the 24,000, 25,000 TEUs, it's a great opportunity to have a nuclear propulsion and sort out the problem forever, saving billions in fuel in the long term and making use of the transition to move into a technology that will really save money and be more competitive. So I think that in the end, we will need to have everything on the table. I tend to agree with those claiming that there is no chance, based on facts and figures, that we can rely only on the green version of the transition.
Thank you, Panos. Maria Rita, for you to finish. It's a shame the French ambassador has left, because she would have taken your idea, and France being a huge country, past country nuclear, perhaps in future. So we will build all those nuclear ships. Never mind. Maria Rita.
Well, let me just first start with a personal note. Since I'm a nuclear engineer, if one day in my life I will see nuclear coming back, I will be quite happy. But
all back to work.
Yes, but coming back to gases, so what we see for 2050. So let me first say that 25 years is a long period, and we may see significant changes that we are not able to predict today. What we have learned in particular in the last few years is that many unpredictable things happen. So we speak under the caveat of the technologies that seems possible as of today, where of course the big missing part of a world that we run only with electrons is the ability to store energy on medium long term, that can be not only over one day, but in particular over seasonal demand and also even mid-term demand fluctuation. So, and let me just say that we see this already in Greece, where growing the wind contribution to the electricity mix. We have a volatility in the sense that one day wind may represent 40% of the total electricity production. The day after, it can represent less than 5%. So, of course, this poses a very huge challenge with respect to the need of dispatchable energy. And dispatchable energy today is molecular. And so I go back to the candidate green molecules, where, let's say, of course, in this moment, what seemed to be a prominent option is hydrogen. Of course, we are all working all around Europe. Greece is lagging behind. I hope we will start doing something concretely in the very near future on biomethane. potentially it's different country by country, but biofuels are certainly one small part, but one part of the solution. I totally agree that there will not be one solution fit all. We will have to leverage on all possible technologies, let's say gas-related technologies are proven, have a long history of being used. We know how the market for the internal market for gases has been already working successfully over the last decades, for the good and for the bad, but overall successfully. So let's say the way seemed to indicate toward, let's say, replacing molecules which carry CO2 with CO2-free molecules, passing through a phase in which CO2 carbon stop and sequestration will be crucial and probably will remain as part of the solution. So we see a grid that become multi-fuel, so a grid that will transport different fuels, different pipes, of course, but a network for natural gas plus CCS or biogas, a network for hydrogen, a network for CO2, and we will see.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for doing this on time. The gas industry does this normally on time and on budget, always. If there are any burning questions from the room, I'd like to open the floor to the participant. I mean, you have here leaders that are doing stuff. Okay, so you had earlier the political person that drafts stuff. Here you have maybe no question. All right, so you've convinced them very well. So no. I think you're a good seller. If you have one final comment, the floor is yours, and then I will close the session.
Yeah, maybe a very, very short comment. We since the beginning of this business, I'm talking about the gas business, we have seen so many changes. And for Sonatrach, we have managed to adapt ourselves to those changes. I don't know what will be the picture in 2050. I can bet I will at least be retired. but for sure, Sonatrach and Algeria will adapt itself to what will be the market at that time. As long as this transition that will lead us to reach 2050 will be a wise transition. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Panos?
I would like to emphasize that point about the wise transition, wise and smart, because the feeling is the way we are dealing with things up till now seems not to be the right way. I do not question the intentions of all parties and bodies and perhaps politicians. I think we all realize what is at stake here. It's the planet itself. I mean, our lives and the lives of our children. But being very excited about it doesn't solve the problem. We need to be smart and wise. And my last comment will be on gas specifically, and the gas industry, meaning the methane industry, let's say. The fact that it needs to adapt. So when we're talking about renewables. Renewables could be a potential refuge for gas. We see today more and more liquefaction terminals turning into electrification so that they will be able to secure a greener product tomorrow. So at least liquefaction will not be done by consuming fossil fuel, but perhaps a renewable green electricity, which is a great use to use excess green electricity. Then transportation could become green as well. Biogas is going to be a clean blend that we can use to further green our mix. And eventually, the future will lie on perhaps a blend of clean fuels, hydrogen-based methane, for example, blue ammonia or blue hydrogen coming from methane with carbon capture. And above all, I think that development of the carbon value chain, the recycling element of methane, the methane industry. So I think if we move along those lines, the life and the prosperity of the LNG and the gas industry will be secured and guaranteed for many decades ahead.
Thank you. All right, Rita, last word.
Well, let's say I cannot other than agree with all my colleagues about the need of having a pragmatic approach toward the energy transition, because that will be the only way to make it possible. But if I can add a couple of considerations, one specific of the gas industry is that as an industry, and here I'm not talking about upstream, midstream, downstream, we have to tackle a bigger credibility issue, which doesn't come only from CO2, because the CO2 is a part of a problem. For an industry, we have a big part of the problem, which is methane. And let's say we rarely talk about methane in a gas summit, because of course we don't want to raise our problems, but industry needs to tackle methane emission. Of course, midstream is doing a lot, downstream is doing a lot, upstream is the part that will have to bear the most important responsibility in proving that we can reduce methane emission. And of course, then non-conventional gases will trigger a lot of other problems there. So we really need to make it to be fully credible. Coming back, and let's say, there is certainly an important new avenue that can be really exploited. That is the one of that Panos was mentioning, of synthetic methane, or e-methane, as Marco Vellana likes to call it. That is CO2 plus hydrogen, and of course this will have a huge benefit of using existing infrastructure. I anticipate the potentially super huge resistance from environmental association that we are creating a new way of extending the life of our old-fashioned business. But from the, let's say, economical and rational point of view will make a huge sense, of course. But the last most important consideration for me in this moment is that we are living such a complex time that the industry need to collaborate. We need to collaborate along the value chain, from upstream, midstream, downstream, shipping, but among technology provider, with the academia. There is a huge effort that we need to do, and we can only do it if we really start. And we, I think, are collaborating, but we need to do it more and more, because only joining forces we can find the solution that we need to find.
Okay, thank you very much. Wise and smart. So you had 4 wise and smart doers in front of you. So I'd like you to thank them, and we will leave the floor. Thank you very much.